Okay. Hi and welcome. Sorry about the delay. We're starting in the Shiur in Bava Kama in Daf Pei Gimel Amud Beis. We're starting Perek HaChoyv. I understand that the rabbi started with you this Perek, but I think if you'll forgive me, we'll maybe start again. It's a new week, a new Magid Shiur, a new beginning. We'll maybe start the Perek again, and we'll see some things that we're going to learn today. So basically, it's actually quite fitting that I'm not me, or that it's a new beginning, Perek HaChoyv, because until now in Bava Kama, we've mainly been speaking about a mazik, like a shor, or a bor, or a eish, or all things. Besides the last Perek you just learned about Geneva, besides for that, you were speaking about damaging somebody's property, right? What happens if you dig a bore and somebody's shore falls in? Or if you light a fire and it goes and burns down somebody's house, or something like this. That's called damaging someone's mammon, someone's property, or you rip their shirt, or whatever it is. Perek HaChoyv is a whole new set of laws, and that's referring to. That's why it's got a new name. You're not even called a mazik; you're called a choyver. Choyver means you damage somebody's guf. You hurt your friend. You had a fight, unfortunately, or whatever. You gave them a punch, you gave them a black eye, whatever you did. That's the whole new parasha, and that's why we find also the Rambam when he brings down the halachas, he brings down in the name of the book where he brings it down is choyvel u'mazik. In other words, there's two separate things. There's a mazik who damages somebody's property, and a choyvel who damages somebody's guf, somebody's body. So that's the whole perek we're going to learn is about damaging somebody's body. And as we're going to see in the Mishnah, there's 5 chiyuvim. There's 5 special chiyuvim that a person has to pay when they damage somebody's body. Does anybody know any of them? I'm opening up for suggestions. Pain. Very good. Your name again? So what's your name again? Alan. Alan said correctly that tsar. Tsar is pain. That's a special humiliation. Very good. Boishes. That's number 2. Medical expenses is ripui, number 3. Anybody else? 2 left. Shy? Nezek, good. That's the standard one, Nezek. And the last one is compensation, like sheves, like exactly if they're out of work. Correct. These 5 things you do not find if your shore damages somebody. If your shore damages even a person, you don't pay tsar, you don't pay boishes, you don't pay ripui or sheves, you only pay nezek. That's why these are called chamisha dvarim, 5 special things which are special for Perek HaChoyv of damaging somebody. So that is what the Mishnah starts off. These 5 things that we just said, which are nezek, which is the actual damages. We'll see how you evaluate that in 1 second. The person's value goes down once, let's say, his hands chopped off or his legs chopped off. That's nezek. Tsar, the pain a person goes through. There's discussion how we evaluate the tsar, but we'll see about that. Ripui, as we said, is the medical expenses. The guy's got to go to a doctor. He's got to pay for medication. You have to pay for that. Sheves, if the guy's out of work for a certain amount of time because you injured him. And boishes, and you humiliated the guy. These things are all listed and more further as the Mishnayos of the Perek go on. This is just the headline. Nezek, but Nezek Ketzad. How do you evaluate Nezek? Sima es einoi. If you blinded a person, you blinded his eye, or kita es yadoi, you chopped off his hand, shiver es ragloi, or you broke his leg. So how do you evaluate such a thing? You know, a person's now without an arm. That's quite a big loss for the guy for the rest of his life. How do you evaluate it? So the Mishnah says, Royan oisoi ki'iluhu eved nimkar b'shuk. We view it, we imagine if this person was on sale as an eved, he's going to go and to be sold to be a slave. That means to say, this person right now, before he had his hand chopped off, how much would he have been gone on the slave market? How much would he have been sold for a certain amount of money? Now he hasn't got a hand, he's certainly worth less. So that difference in price is the nezek, that's the actual damage, and that you pay. Tsar, how do you evaluate tsar? So kavoi b'shvud oibam b'masmer, if you like burnt him with a hot metal stick or something, or with a nail, filu al tzipornoi, even on a nail like a metal nail, even on his fingernail, makom she'ina oiseh chabura, such a place, it didn't make a chabura there. In other words, you just gave him tsar. It didn't cause him actually a chabura. It didn't cause him a bruise. Just caused him a little bit of pain. You have to pay for that. This is the mission to give an example where there's only tsar involved. Here there's no nezek or anything else, just tsar. So in oimdin kama adam kayotzi b'zeroitz litzoy liyoit mitzdarkach. You make an evaluation how much a person would have taken to take such a little amount of pain, and that's how much you pay. Fine, that's the gabi that. Ripui, how do you evaluate the expenses of the medical expenses? Hiko, if you hit him, chayiv l'rapoiso, you chayiv to pay for his medical expenses. All avoid smachim if certain smachim like a rash or something comes up. Imach masamaka, if it's because of what you did that you caused it, then chayiv, then you chayiv. Shaloi mach masamaka, then you're potter. If it came out anyway, these are the things were anyway going to come about, didn't come about directly because of what you did, then you're potter. Chai soiv anistera, chai soiv anistera. If it got all swollen up and then it got better, and it's swollen up and it got better, you're chayav to pay for the refuah each time as much as you caused. You have to do. However, if chaysa kol sorcha, if it was fully better, the guy was fully recovered and he was better, and then he gets sick again, then ain't chayav l'rafoisa. Then we say you finished your job and you did what you caused, and what came out later was not because of you. Sheves. How do you evaluate Sheves, the loss that he's going to cause? He's going to be not able to work for the next few weeks. You view him as if, because now you've cut, we're going to go into this later in other Mishnais, but now you've cut off his leg or something or his arm, so he's only roy from now on to do a certain avoider, to be a shomer kishurim. I think Rabbi Tzadok explained to you, the guy's going to watch a field of cucumbers or something like this. And how much does a person take for an hourly rate or a daily rate? And that for that amount of time that he's in bed because you caused him to, he's not mobile now for a few weeks or something. So you pay him during those weeks the amount of money that it will take to he would have made as a shomer kishurim. We'll see that maybe we'll say later. If it's a miracle, you already paid him the actual nezek, so you only have to pay him the shepherds. Boishes, the last thing in the Mishnah, hakol lefiyam avayish v'hamisbayish. Boishes is a thing that depends on who you embarrassed and who you are, that you are the embarrasser. As we know, if you embarrass someone who's, if you embarrass the Queen of England or whatever, then you're going to pay more because she's supposedly more mukubad. Whereas if you, whereas if you embarrass someone who's, some lowlife on the street that nobody really cares about so much, then you won't pay so much. Similarly, on the person who's doing the embarrassment, if you're embarrassed by the Queen or by the Prime Minister or someone, then the embarrassment is more. And if you're embarrassed by someone who's not such a, famous person, then your embarrassment is less. That's basically the halachas of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to go on a lengthy discussion, the first Amud or two over here, how we know the whole idea that you are paying. There's a question that you're going to pay. Yeah.
There's one question. When it says is that literal, or are we saying it's like you're like someone in the job market? You could do this before, and now your ability is diminished because of the
right. It means
it's not literally. It's not like, and they use that example because that was the way it was. But the way we interpret that, yes, is that it's like you are basically a person in the job market with a specific top key and a set of skills, but now you're damaged. And now you can't.
Well, I think it is. I mean, I think that it is literal because the question is, how do you evaluate such a loss? If someone loses that, how do you make that evaluation? The Mishnah is telling us we make it by we imagine as if he was a slave to be sold, which they used to have, and that's I think it is quite a literal thing actually.
We don't have slaves today.
We don't have slaves today. Yeah. The question of how we pay exactly today is a good question. We'll discuss that also because we will discuss it in the Gemara. There's a Gemara that will discuss exactly how we do the payment today. But yeah. So just before we start, I did bring a few chumashim. If everybody's got, just because we're going to learn some psukim about paying. Everybody knows that the psukim in different places say an eye for an eye and all these things, and we really need to know how we know that you don't actually, if you blind somebody, how do we know you don't take out the eye of the person who did the blinding? So the main psukim that we're going to look at is actually in the end of Parshas Emor. I was going to print out a sheet, but then I thought that we'd manage with the chumashim. It's in Vayikra. If we open up to Vayikra Chof Dalet. Chof Dalet, it's the end of Parshas Emor. I would say a page number, but I think everybody's got different ones. Vayikra Chof Daled, and then towards the end, pasuk Yud Zayin. Vayikra Chof Daled, Yud Zayin. Yes, that's correct. You got that? Excellent. So it starts as follows. Yud Zayin. The Ish ki yake kol nefesh adam mois yumas. A person who will strike Adam, he will mois yumas. 1 second.
Anyway,
a person who strikes a person, just checking something with the Zoom. Person who strikes any person mois yumas, he will be. So similar. It sounds like he will be killed, right? The person who strikes somebody will be killed. But we're going to see from the hemshich of the psukim that actually this is referring. We're not referring to killing him literally, because as we're going to see in a minute, we're not talking about a person who was a murderer at all. We're talking about a person who damaged somebody else, and somebody who damages somebody else for sure doesn't die. So the question: does this mois yumas mean that you kill the organ of the person that did it? Let's say you chopped off somebody's hand. You have to mois yumas, you have to chop off their hand, or it means you have to pay. We'll see in a second from the Gemara. That's the first pasuk. So then it says, the next pasuk says, "Umake nefesh behema yishalmeno nefesh tachas nefesh." If a person who strikes an animal, in this case, there's no sheves, there's no boishes, there's no ripui, there's only nezek. So then yishalmeno, then you pay. Then you pay for what you did. That says clearly you pay. The next pasuk says, "V'ishki yitein mumba amisay." This is our main parsha. Ishki yitein mumba amisoy. The person who puts a blemish in his friend, he damages his friend. Kasher asa kain ye loy. As he did, that should be done to him. So as the next pasuk says, shever tachas shever, ayin tachas ayin, shein tachas shein, kasher yitein mumba adam kain ye nosein boy. Sounds like literally, if he broke an eye, he has to give his eye. We take out his eye. If you broke a tooth, you take out his tooth. That's what it sounds like from the psukim. We'll just do 2 more psukim. Someone who hits an animal pays, as we said above. Someone who strikes a person mortally, this means he will be killed. And then it says, Mishpat echad yelachem. There should be one law for everybody, as we'll see what that pasuk means in a second. So if you're able to keep the Chumash open while we go through the Gemara, that will be the best, because we're going to see some psukim, and we'll see how things work out. But as I said, the simple reading of the verses sounds like what's happening: a guy who blinds someone, you take out his eye. That's what it would seem like. But as we know, that's not the case. As the Mishnah said, that's not the case. But the question is, what's the source that that's not what we do? The Gemara says, Amai. The first line of the Gemara is Amai. Why are we paying? Ayin tachas ayin Amar Rachman. The Torah says ayin tachas ayin. One of the psukim we read, there's also other psukim, says that you give an eye for an eye. Eima ayin mamash. Why don't we say it's literally the eye of the person the perpetrator that was the choiver of the mazik? We should take out his eye. Says the Gemara, loy sal kedaita. You don't think that is. That cannot be. So Sanya, because we learned in a brayso, yochol sima es einoi. I would think someone who blinds somebody else, masama es einoi. I would think that you blind him. Or kita as yodoi. If you cut off his hand, mekataya es yodoi. You cut off the person's hand who did it. Or shiver es ragloi. If you broke his leg, meshaber es ragloi. You break the person's leg. That's what I would think. Talmud loima. The Torah says, Makya Adam, Makya Behem. There's some sort of Gezeir Shava we'll see in a minute. It's not clear. The Gemara is right now going to discuss which pasuk of what we just read are we talking about. It says Makya Adam. There's a comparison, comparison between Makya Adam and Makya Behem. And we say Ma Makya Behem la Tashlumin. Just like striking an animal is la Tashlumin, and that there's nobody argues on that. That we saw clearly in the Psukim. Striking an animal, you have to pay. Af makya adam, so the comparison is so to hitting a person, you have to pay. That's the first half of the brisa. As some sort of limud, the gezeir shava, makya adam, makya behema, we'll see exactly where it says that in those psukim, but that's a limud. We learn from there that just like makya behema you pay, so to hitting a person you pay. Ve'im nafshecha loima, the brisa says, and if you're going to ask a question, there'll be some sort of pircha or question on the limud that we just said. The Gemara is going to discuss what that means also in a second. But if you don't like what we just said, if you don't like that limud, there's another limud. Harehu oimer, the pasuk says, another pasuk, this isn't in the parsha that we read, This is another pasuk. It says, "Loi tikhu koife lenefesh roitzeach ashehu rosh halamus." For in the Gemara, the pasuk says, "Don't take a koife, I think a ransom, amount of money for a roitzeach ashehu rosh halamus." The simple reading of this verse means somebody who's a murderer and who's really chayav misa, he cannot buy his way out. He cannot pay off Bezdin. He can't give a ransom to save himself. It says the Bezdin are not allowed to take a koifer, a redemption, for a nefesh roitzeach. Someone who's a roitzeach, who's a murderer, cannot redeem himself with money. But there's an extra word in the pasuk over here, nefesh. It could have just said, I think, loy tikhu koifer ashehu rosh halamus, or roitzeach ashehu rosh halamus. Why does it say nefesh? So we learn the nefesh roitzeach iyata loikeach koifer. You can't take a koifer, a redemption, to someone who is a murderer. Aval ataloikeach koifer leroishe ivorim she'ein choizrim. You can take a koifer for a choivel, so someone who is choivel, and roishe ivorim means or any aver for that matter, but roishe ivorim means the fingers or the toes or an arm or whatever. You can take a koifer for that, meaning you pay for that. That's what it means. Koifer means a mandatory redemption. You can't give for a murderer, cannot buy himself out, but you can pay for a vorim that you damage of another person. That you do pay for. That's the end of the brisa. That is the end of the brisa. And from here, basically, till the end of this Amud, we're going to discuss exactly how to explain this brisa, mainly the first half. Again, the first half of the brisa was a comparison between Makeh Adam and Makeh Behema. And we say, just like Makeh Behema you pay, so to Makeh Adam you pay. Now the Gemara asks, Hi Makeh, which Makeh are we talking about over here to say that you pay? So the Gemara says, Ilema Makeh Behema Yishalmena Umakeh Adam Yumas. Maybe it's that pasuk. That when we just read the psukim, I just look back into the Chumash. That is the pasuk of pasuk Chof Aleph over here. Makeh Behema Yishalmena Umakeh Adam Yumas. That's the one we're quoting, right? Makeh Behema Yishalmena Umakeh Adam Yumas. Maybe that's the comparison. The comparison is that you see in the same pasuk, we compare clearly on pasuk Chof Aleph. We compare clearly Makeh Behema to a Makeh Adam. So maybe from there we see, just like Makeh Behema you pay, so to Makeh Adam you pay. But the Gemara doesn't like that, because the Gemara says, Hahu b'katola ksiv. That's referring to Makeh Adam Yumas. That's referring to killing the person who killed, because he was a killer. The Makeh Adam in this parsha, in this pasuk in Chof Aleph, is referring to a murderer. So that's not going to help us for what we want. Our parak is not talking about murderers. Our parak is talking about damages or choivels, or people that there's no English word for really a choivel, is there? I don't know, but someone who damages their friend, not a shore, or not a, again, someone who damages their friend. That's not the subject of this verse.
Inflicts is what the article is.
Inflicts, okay. And then if you can inflict damage to a shore, I don't know. But if you're inflicting to your friend, to your fellow, that's choivel. You could exactly. So then it's not accurate, really. Choivel is a special word for choivel b'chaveris. So we'll use that. If everyone's familiar with the term, we'll use choivel, and that's specifically referring to damaging your friend, a person. So, but that's not going to help us from pasuk Chof Aleph, because pasuk Chof Aleph is Makeh Adam Yumas. That's referring to a murderer. That's what the Gemara says back into the Gemara. Hahu b'katola ksiv. That verse is talking about katola, and that's not going to help us. Elo mehacha. So we're going to now make another attempt to make the comparison. Makeh nefesh behema yishalmena nefesh tachas nefesh. That was in the mid. That was the first pasuk, if I'm not mistaken, that we read. No, that was the second pasuk. Sorry, pasuk Yudches. Umakeh nefesh behema yishalmena nefesh tachas nefesh. Person who strikes an animal will pay a nefesh tachas nefesh. Right? He will pay basically. That's one pasuk. That doesn't speak about damaging a person at all, but the next pasuk does. For Samichlei, the Gemara says, in the next pasuk next to it is V'ish ki yitei mum ba'amisoy, kasher asa kain ye'aseloi. What someone who inflicts a mum onto his friend, as he did, so should be done to him. So now we're making the gezerah shavah between these two pasukim. The first pasuk speaks about paying clearly. That's makeh nefesh behema yishalmena. And we learn that, so too that the next pasuk also, because it's next to it, and we'll see in a second, Ishki yitin mum ba'misoy, kasher asa kain ye'aseloi. Even though it sounds like kain ye'aseloi, you do to him what he did, but we learn from the fact that it says in the previous pasuk pay, that you also pay. But the Gemara asks on that also another question. The Gemara says, Hi lav makehu. The second pasuk never actually said the word makeh. Never said the word makeh. If you note in the second pasuk, it said ish ki yitain mum ba'amisoy, someone who gives or inflicts a blemish onto his fellow. Doesn't say the word makeh. And if we notice, the Brisa said the limit is makeh adam, makeh behema. So it sounds like the limit is from the word makeh. So the Gemara is asking, but the second pasuk doesn't say the word makeh in it. Says the Gemara, that's not a problem. Hakar ka'amrina. We don't mean literally the word makeh. We mean the Indian, the explanation of hitting or inflicting somebody, as Rashi, if I'm not mistaken, speaks out that you sometimes, Rashi explains this as a gezeira shava, and we have a rule that I'm sure you've come up with it in different times, that Rabbi Yishmael says shava koyen uva koyen. We can make it sometimes a gezeira shava, even though the words are not exactly the same. As long as they've got the same meaning behind the words, you can make the same gezeira shava. For example, we find by negat saras in a house. This Rashi brings from this is the famous statement of Rabbi Yishmael, that a kohen comes and checks the house once, and he comes and checks it another time, and we make this separate dinim, different dinim. The first time he comes, the second time he comes, and we compare the dinim from the gezeira shava from Vashav and Uva. If we look if Rashi says that Vashava kohen, Uva kohen, some in one place it says Vashav, in one place it says Uva, and we learn different things out from one another, even though they're not the same. Vashav is different from Uva, right? But they mean the same kind of thing. Come and return mean the same thing, so we make a gezeira shava. So to over here, hakar ka'amrina means to say the meaning of the pasuk is both pasukim are speaking about hitting or inflicting. The first pasuk of pasuk yudches, u'makeh nefesh behema, that's makeh, hitting an animal, and v'ishki yitein mum. Yitein mum is also a kind of haka'ah, and there's also a kind of hitting, so we make the gezeira shava, and that is how we say, and the Gemara says, ma hakar, back into the Gemara, ma hakar ha'amura b'behema l'tashlumim, just like hitting a behema means tashlumim, af hakar ba'adam l'tashlumim. So to hitting a person is tashlumim. So therefore we know that when the pasuk says ishki yite mum ba'amisoy, when you give a mum to your friend, kasha asa keni asa loy pasuk you test, we're learning that it means actually paying. That's what we're holding right now. Good. Now the Gemara asks another question. V'haksiv ishki yakeh kol nefesh adam mois yumas. That's the first pasuk that we read. That's pasuk Yud Zayin. That's why I thought it was good to bring the Chumash, because a lot of the pasukim over here. The first pasuk Yud Zayin. One second more. Ishki yake kol nefesh adam mois yumas. A person who strikes a person should surely die. So the Gemara is asking over here that it sounds like we should take it literally. Now it's quite important. Rashi explains over here. Don't learn this pasuk is talking about a murderer. Maybe it's talking about a murderer, because he says clearly, you see from the context of the next pasukim which we read, we're not talking about a murderer. From the next pasuk, Ishki Yit and Rumba Misa, we see this speaking about damages, but it still says Mois Yumas. So Mois Yumas must mean that the actual organ should die. It can't mean that the person literally dies, because we're not talking about a murderer. So the Gemara is assuming now that this pasuk is referring to a choivel, someone who damages their friend. Let's say he chops off his arm, and Mois Yumas, you should kill the arm of the person that did it. So the Gemara is asking a question. A simple reading of Mois Yumas sounds like that you have to kill the arm. But the Gemara answers, no, b'mamon. It means that you don't kill it literally. It means you have to pay as if you kill that arm, but you're paying. It doesn't mean literally. The Mois Yumas over here means that you have to pay. Yeah, Bo.
The pasuk, it tells us when you make a move, it doesn't say how you make a move. Can we make an assumption that it's a lav dafka, that it's a physical thing, that it can also be a verbal thing? For instance, if a person says something about, it could be a girl that she's not a sula, it could be a person not a kohen, we're not talking about it in zoning, that's all separate thing. But here, just direct. So also there, could we apply this?
Right. There could, first of all, verbal things could be chayav because of boishes, which is true. There could be, if you insult someone, barabim.
This is real money. It could be kasuba or whatever it is. This person
I think that the context over here, I'm not sure is a verbal kind of abuse, because of the next pasuk, shever taka shever, ayin taka sayin, shein taka shein. And also, I don't think here the subject is a verbal, but there would be a boishes in if there was boishes. In if you verbally embarrass somebody, then it's. I don't know whether there's any other. There's no real nezik when you verbally damage somebody, maybe. tsar. There's no physical tsar. There's no loss of job probably. If there would be, that would be an interesting question. But there would be a chiyuv. I'm not sure if that's exactly in this passage.
The pen is mightier than the sword.
Could cause more damage.
The pen is mightier than the sword. If it's written defamation, a person has to live with it. The sword just killed you. But a person has to live with it.
Yeah, so listen, it's definitely not recommended practice to verbally abuse somebody, and there are chiyuvim in it. There's for sure a surim involved. The damage involved is another shot, isn't that? Yeah. We'll see we'll see when we learn the sugyas of boishes. We'll see exactly how that comes in line. Good. So now the Gemara asks. So we've just established that the pasuk of Mois Yumas in the beginning is mom. Now the Gemara says, "Mimai," we're holding like towards the end of the skinny lines, the 3 lines from the skinny lines. Mimai de mamon. How do you actually know that's talking about mamon? Eima ba misa mamish. Maybe it means misa mamish, meaning misa of that aver. Maybe it literally means you take out that aver. How do you know? So the Gemara says, "Lo sal kedaitach." You can't think that because of 2 reasons. Chada zaha iskish lamake behema. Yishalmen. Number 1, we already said that we have this gezeira shava, or this connection between pasuk yud ches and pasuk yud tes, which is make nefesh behema yishalmena and ishki item mumba miso, that we learn you have to pay. So that we should learn from there that also the beginning of the moist yumas means to pay. That's number 1. But oiksiv basrei, it also says afterwards, kasha yite mumba odom kain yinosein boy. That's actually all the way at end of pasuk chof. There's another pasuk which basically repeats it, which it repeats it again. So why is it repeated again? To also tell me that it's a mandatory payment. Because if it was literal, we wouldn't have to repeat it again. Shma mina mammon. Therefore, we know that the chiyuv is mammon. That explains the first half of the brisa. That explains when the brisa says makeh odom makeh behema. It really means this gezeira shava basically between makeh nefesh behema yishalmena and ishki yitin mumba misoy, to tell me that you pay a mandatory amount. Fine. But if you remember, the brisa added in another line. The brisa added in, and if you're going to ask a question, if you're going to ask some sort of question on this limit, I'll bring you another pasuk. I'll bring you another pasuk to prove that it means mammon. The other pasuk was this pasuk about buying a ransom, that a reitzech can't pay a ransom, but you do pay a ransom for when you chovel b'chaveiro, when you do damage him. What was the question? What was wrong with the limit? So now the Gemara discusses that. Umay im nafshecha loyma. What does it mean when the brisa said you might have a question over here? Im nafshecha loyma means you're going to ask a question on this limit. What was the question going to be that we needed to therefore bring another limit? Says the Gemara, "My im nafshecha loyma suka kasha latana." The Gemara is asking a question. The Tana is asking the following difficulty: "My chazis to yalfis mimake behema, leilef mimake odo." Why are we saying that the ishki yite mumba amisoy kasha also keni also? We learn that out of gezeira shava to the previous pasuk of mimake nefesh behema yishalmen. Why do we learn it from there? We should learn it out from the parsha of make odom, meaning we should learn it out from a roitzeach, basically. We know that the halacha is a roitzeach, someone who's a murderer and kills someone. Then we do literally kill that person, obviously with the right conditions, with the right basis and the right warning and everything. But the punishment in theory for a murderer is to get killed. So we do take it literally. So we should say that this parsha yud tes, that's our main pasuk of kishki yite mumba amisa. When someone gives a mum to his friend, do to him like he did to his fellow. Maybe we should learn that out from a roitzeach. Just like a roitzeach, we take literally. So to this pasuk is literally. And a guy chops off his friend's arm, you chop off his arm, chop off his leg, you chop off his leg. That's what the Gemara is asking. Then the Gemara says, no. Danin nezikin min nezikin. We'd rather compare this parsha of ki yite mumba misa, which is referring to nezikin, not misa, not katola. It's referring to damages. We'd prefer to compare that to the first pasuk of Yud Ches of Makeh Nefesh Behema Yishalmena, which is also referring to damages. You damaged the behema, right? You damaged the behema. So in the next pasuk, you damaged your friend. That's a very comparable damages to damages. And we'd rather learn out that you pay from that pasuk. But then the Gemara asks, the Gemara says, "Dan in nezikin, nezikin ve'ein dan in nezikin min misa." We do not want to learn nezikin from misa. Fine. Does the Gemara know? Adarabba. I'll give a different argument to argue exactly the opposite. Dan in odom mi odom, ve'ein dan in odom mi behema. I'd much rather make a limud of hurting your friend to killing your friend, because they're both referring to damaging or killing a person. When the victim is a person, that's also a comparison between two parashas, parasha of hitting your friend and parasha of killing your friend. So we should say, just like killing was literal, so to the hitting, in other words, literal that we kill the person who killed, so to is literal that when we talk about choivel, that you kill the person who was choivel. The ain't done in adam behema, and it's not so comparable a person and an animal. In other words, we're arguing that let's learn our pasuk yud tes ki yishem adam ki yitem mum ba'amisoi. We should learn that out from another person. When you damage a person, when you kill a person, that we take it literally. So kasha also kini also, you should also take it literally, rather than learning it to the uncomparable case of a behema. Says the Gemara, Hainu de Gatani im nafshecha loima. That's why the Bryce has said, you're right. That's actually a question. And therefore, that's a question. And therefore, it's not clear how to learn. In terms of, should we compare it to the parasha of murdering a person, and therefore we take it literally, or should we compare it to the parasha of damaging an animal and take it as a payment? It's not clear. There's comparisons this way, there's comparisons this way. So that limit is not clear. That's why we go to another limit of Harehu Oimer lo tikku koif el nefesh roitzeach ashehu rosh halamus. Don't take a ransom for a roitzeach who is a Rasha who's supposed to die. You can't take a ransom for a roitzeach who wants to buy himself out, but you can take you can take a ransom for somebody who damages their friend. So therefore, somebody who damages their friend, the bottom line is they pay, and that you can do. And the bottom line is, in terms of the whole parasha we spoke out this morning, in the end of Emor about paying, it's not clear. Should you compare Makeh Odom to Makeh Behemor and therefore pay, or you should compare it to a murder and you don't pay? It's not 100% clear. So we go to another pasuk of this Lo tikchu koifer the nefesh roitzeach, and we darshan that a roitzeach, a murderer who's actually chayav misa, cannot buy himself out of that, but a person who damages his friends should and can buy himself out. And that's that's the chiyuv that he's got. Okay, another few more lines just about this about this pasuk. The Gemara asks, for high loy tikru koifer the nefesh roitzeach lemeute roishe ivorim hu asa. Is that true that it's coming? Lemeute roishe ivorim hu asa. It's coming to tell me that you pay for when you damage someone's ivorim. High me boy leid amar rachmona loy savid beitarti. We need this pasuk for a different thing, to tell me you don't give somebody two punishments, meaning loy tishko minei mamun particularly. I might think that actually a person who is a murderer should maybe pay for the damages that he did. If he killed somebody and he ripped the shirt at the same time, maybe he should pay the damages for the shirt and also get a chiyuv misa. But maybe that you need this pasuk to come and tell me loy tikru kofer the nefesh roitzeach. He doesn't have to pay. Somebody who's chayav misa, he only gets misa. Right, he doesn't have to pay a monetary value. That's what I thought. That's what I might think you need this pasuk for. So therefore, it's not extra to tell me our whole theme, which we need to know, that a person who damages their friend pays. No, it's needed to tell me that a murderer, a different halacha completely. A murderer doesn't pay for the damages and get killed. Says the Gemara, no, you don't need it for that, because you know that from somewhere else. Hi, mikadei rishosoi nafka. We learn that out from mikadei rishosoi, as the Gemara speaks out. Risha achas atam mechayvoi. You cannot give a person two punishments. That's a cloud that we have, comes up in other places, that when Bezdin enforce a punishment, they do not enforce two punishments. They do not give Malchus and Mammon, or Malchus and Misa, or in our case, it means to say we don't make the person, the murderer, chayav to pay money and also chayav Misa. No, he's only chayav Misa. So that we know from already, Kedei Rishosoi. You only give him one punishment. So that means that our pasuk is still extra, that to tell me that you can buy himself out for being when he damages somebody. So let's do two more lines. It says the Gemara, we still need it. You need it for the simple explanation. That's called the poshat pshat. You need it for the simple reading of the verse. The simple reading of the verse is, as we keep saying, that the murderer cannot buy himself out of his chiyuv misa. You need the pasuk for that. That's the pshuto shel mikra, the simple reading of the verse. You need it for that. And how do you know to deduce from here that he cannot buy himself out? That somebody who is chayv b'chaveiro can buy themselves out. You always need some sort of yitur, some sort of extra thing in the pasuk in order to learn out an extra law. If you just need the verse of the simple reading, you can't learn anything. So the Gemara is asking, the simple reading of the verse is you can't buy out. A murderer cannot buy himself out. As the Gemara, im kain lichter rachmana lo tikru koifer la'asher hu rosha lomus. The pasuk should have just left out the word nefesh. If the simple reading of the verse is that a murderer cannot buy himself out, it should have said lo tikru koifer la'asher hu rosha lomus. Lenefesh roitzeach lamali. Why does the Torah write lenefesh roitzeach? Shma meno, you make from here the diuk. Lenefesh roitzeach iata lokech koifer. You don't take a koifer from the nefesh roitzeach, but ata lokech koifer leroisha ibarim she'einon choizrin. Therefore, you can take a koifer for the roisha ibarim that are not coming back. Okay, let's just finish up to the two dots. We're almost there. Then the Gemara says, once we have this pasuk of lo tikru koifer, why do you need the first pasuk? Why do you need the other limit of makeh makeh? And the Gemara says, Omri imehai havramina iboy eino nesiv iboy demei eino nesiv. If we would have just had the first limit of makeh makeh, I would have thought you could either give your eye, or you could either give, or you could either pay. In other words, you could choose. That's the third option over here. Maybe you could choose. The person wants to pay. If the person would rather give up his eye, he can give up his eye. As the Gemara, kamash malan mi behema ma make behema l'tashlumin af make adam l'tashlumin. It has to be that way. You have to pay. There's no options involved over here. Just like if you hit a behema, there's no option involved. You can't, if you blind a behema, you can't give up your eye and say, yeah, that's going to be my payment. No, you have to actually pay. No choices involved. So too, when you strike your friend, you chop off his arm, you take out his eye. The chiyuv is that you have to pay. So the bottom line is, as we know, that you have to pay when you damage somebody, and it's not taken literally, and you don't even have the choice either. And that's learned out from these psukim that we saw today. We'll see tomorrow that there's more psukim you can learn out from different places. But that I think is good for today. Thank you very much.